Once upon a time, there was a good old traditional housewife. She cooked, she cleaned, cared for her children and the man of the house, and of course, she didn't talk back. She was both obedient and soft by nature. She was a good woman who always made good choices.
Shut that shit off.
We're good moms, bad choices.
Two single moms
Who said fuck the patriarchy
shared all their bad choices
and found out they weren't so bad after all.
We're experts,
oversharers,
and your new besties.
sit back and enjoy the ride.
Welcome back to Good Moms, Bad Choices.
I'm Erica.
And I'm Mila.
Happy Wednesday, bitches.
Happy motherfucking hump day.
Happy motherfucking hump day. You guys, I'm wearing our merch. If you guys haven't checked out our merch, we have our black as fuck, mom as fuck, fine as fuck merch.
It actually recently went viral, so if you guys haven't grabbed yours, grab it quick.
Not recently.
It's going quick. It's flying off the shelf.
It's very chic. It's very, black. You can wear it with like a silky like skirt. You can wear it with jeans. You can wear it sweats. You can cut off the bottom. You can tie it like me. See, so you can snatch your waist.
This is for the black moms, but we're going to bring something more diverse to
our non-blacks moms.
We're inclusive. This one was an exclusive drop for the black moms, but you know what? We're cooking something up, and don't worry, we're going to include you too.
And we have black aunties. So for the black aunties, we also have a version of this shirt. So yes. Hi,
how are you?
I'm great.
I feel like we haven't been in here in a minute.
I know. It's early in the morning. It is 8:32 a.m. in LA, and we are up recording early because we are responsible women. And also because we're interviewing someone from the UK.
Someone we've been waiting to interview for a long
I wish I
time.
had nails. I could
No, we're on a budget. No nails.
Anymore. But we're interviewing someone from the UK that's been on our radar for a long time. We've been chatting in the DMs for a while now, and I'm just so excited to have her on. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Shadira Egaru, Sunday Times Bestselling author, #1 bestselling author, a.k.a. the Slumflower.
Yay!
Thank you so much for having me. I've been wanting to come on this podcast for such a long time. I am not a mother at the moment, but I do have a mother who made some choices that might be described as bad choices, but I empathize with her and I recognize that even though I'm not a mother yet, I'm also a woman, and I can see that women have to make tricky choices every day just to survive. So it must be even harder making those difficult choices while having children to take care of. So I intend to navigate this episode with grace, but also to really tackle matters that have affected me by having a mother who I've been affected by.
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. And also, I feel like you are a mother. You're a mother to a lot of women who look up to you and look to you for advice and look to you to like set them straight because bitches be tripping. I am bitches.
I really appreciate that.
Sometimes when I'm looking at your videos, you're looking straight at me because if you look on Shadira's Instagram, all of her videos are very like cut close, looking straight into your soul, and she's like talking to me and telling me all these things that I'm doing wrong, and I'm like, she's right. I know. And she's younger than me. How does she know?
Every woman has a season of dumb bitchness. But don't worry, you too can heal. You know, everybody has a season. Just like everybody gets the cold or the flu once a year, every woman has a hard season of dumb bitchness. And the hope is that you take the immunization and you get smarter, and that you won't you'll stop
a lifetime.
You'll stop being a dumb bitch. You know, you won't keep getting the chicken pox. You just get them those one time. You won't keep getting the fucking, the thing that you shouldn't get. You're just going to stop playing with the guy who burns you. But, sometimes women need to hear it over and over and over again, and that's where you come in. So thank you very much for your service.
Thank you. I really appreciate you calling me a mother, even though I haven't physically birthed a child, because I do feel like the work I do takes on a mothering role. I definitely and deeply enjoy being in a position and a role and a career that involves me mothering women through their decisions. And what I mean by mothering women through their decisions, for those who might not be familiar with my work, is outside of me being a Sunday Times #1 bestselling author, I also have a podcast called the Slumflower Hour. And on the Slumflower Hour podcast, I use it as a space to directly speak to women about the realities of what it involves to love men. The issue that I've found that women are struggling with is that they value men more than they value being respected. And that leads to a plethora of issues, whether it's men ghosting you and that triggering you into having a mental breakdown, whether that's women choosing men over their children, whether that's women leaving their degrees and their work and their passions to follow a man behind. All of this validation and focus that is placed on men. I use the Slumflower Hour podcast as a site to dismantle that and provide women with actionable and applicable tools to change that, starting from now. I'm not someone that likes to deal with the fluffy sort of like woohoo. I think manifestation is powerful, but I believe in taking action. You can sit from day in and day out trying to manifest a man, or you can make applicable and impactful changes to yourself and your environment that will change the kind of atmospheres you're in. It will change the kind of men you're around, and it will change how you talk to men. And all of those factors do have an impact on the outcome of what your relationships with men end up looking like. And so I like to consider myself very intellectual but motherly at the same time. I think I'm like the older sister who will pull you to the side and tell you the things that maybe mom didn't tell you because mom is maybe still in her pick-me phase. Do you guys use the phrase pick-me over in LA?
Yeah, we do. We're very familiar with the pick-me's.
Yes.
They're still alive and well.
They're still at large.
There's a very alive and well tribe of pick-me's here in America.
We empathize with the pick-me's because deep down, pick-me's want to be loved. And they see no way of being loved outside of themselves, bending for men's approval. But the fallacy here that I wish women would recognize is that the more you bend yourself for a man's approval, the less men respect you. And you don't actually yield any success from doing that. What you get at the end of it, if you make it to the end alive, is resentment and time that you're never going to get back. Time is the most valuable thing we have as women.
Girl, I've seen so many women, like my mom included, just waste so much time. So many talented, powerful women that just give the fucking power up because we've been just brainwashed and believing like our worth is so deeply tied to our relationship status. And it's crazy, like smart women, powerful women I look up to, and I'm like, how the fuck did you get this fucked up? All for the love of a man, all for the just to say, I'm married, I have a boyfriend, I'm kept. I really do appreciate like your like straight to the point, no sugar coated bullshit, because I think women like need that. You know, we've been kind of gypped into this idea that we need men and we need relationships to be valued, and it's so fucked up. When I was reading through some of your book, it kind of reminded me. Have you read Bell Hooks' The Communion, the female search for love? It's like the modern time version of that. And I've been reading, they always make fun of me because it's like withered. I've been reading it for like a year, but it takes so much. I have to really pay attention. I'm like highlighting shit because it's truly like dissects how deeply women have been fucking brainwashed and how we are conditioned and programmed and like domesticated from birth to kind of put men first and put them on a pedestal and forget about ourselves. And I was just reading your bio and they were like feminist, and I was like, it's so crazy. Like, are we modern feminists, including us? But it's just like, no, I just want equal rights and to like be loved actually and not like theoretically. I'm wondering like,
and even that word,
sorry, keep going.
I was just going to say, even that word feminist really stands out to me because some people describe me as a feminist. I describe myself as a feminist, but there are people who disagree with me describing myself as a feminist because a lot of my politic and praxis revolves around the idea that men need to open their wallets and give us their money. I can't imagine laying with a man and he's not making my life any better. The reason why some women hear that and think, well, this isn't feminist, is because the foundational idea of feminism is rooted in the idea of us working towards equality with men and, you know, one size fits all, fairness for all. For me, I believe that women are far and forever above men. We can never be equal to men. We're superior to them, and it's okay to acknowledge that. Trying to equalize yourself to men is you actually downgrading yourself to a level that stunts your own growth and is an insult to your divinity as a woman. So I do believe as a woman, you can be feminist and also ask men for things and not feel like this man is entitled to stuff from you. Because that's where I notice a lot of women struggle with asking for things. I think it's okay to ask men for things, given that we live in a world where men feel no fear about asking us for some pussy. They feel no fear about asking us for our number without even having introduced themselves, done anything to impress us. You approach a stranger and you expect that woman to give you her personal contact details because you like the way her boobs bounce. Is everybody okay?
That's so true. Is that men they really don't have any sort of hang up when it comes to beginning the relationship already asking for shit. Whereas women, we resist. We don't want to appear like we don't want to appear like a pick me, even if everything that we're doing is giving pick me. We don't want to ask for, especially financials. I mean, for me, that I was just having this conversation yesterday with my friend. I was like, I think that the energy that I've put out in the world in this space is not that of I need to be taken care of by a man. And I don't know. I think a lot of women that are, sometimes I battle with this word alpha female. But alpha females, I think experience this often of like men not thinking that they need anything, and so therefore it's not offered, and also the alpha female, their ego not allowing them to even fix their mouth to even ask for anything.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that, I know that I resonate with that. I've never been a woman that's been like flued out, and I've been flued out one time and it didn't go well for me. I got dry humped and had to escape the country. I had to leave the country, but that's another story. I find that I find that even whether you're alpha female or you're not, asking for what you need, especially when it comes to finances, is really tricky for women, including myself. And I don't know where that, I think I could say for me, it comes from, I've come from a long line of strong women that didn't ask for shit. But those long line of women that didn't ask for shit were suffering. They've been suffering. I look at even my mom. She's really successful, but it's always been on her. Like, there's been no one to come. There's been no man, even though she has a partner. There's been no man to come in and save her financially ever. And I see myself kind of going down that same road in ways. And I guess I'm curious, like, what do you have? Like, what advice would you give to the alpha female who struggles with that, who has her own, right? Like, she can provide for herself. And I think that's a lot of times too why we make these exceptions for men and are like, well, I don't really need that because I already make this, so I don't really need that. Do you think that that's true in your opinion, or should the alpha female who has her own still have these expectations? And if so, how do we go about asking?
That is an incredible question. And as an alpha female myself, I also don't like that phrase because the word alpha female or alpha male has so many stereotypes and connotations attached to it. But I really resonate with your definition of being an alpha female, where, just like you, we're both successful women. We have come from a lineage of women who have managed to do it by themselves, whether they suffered or not, in silence or out loud. For me, being an alpha woman now looks like the fact that I have a career that I have sustained by myself. I have an income that allows me to live a lifestyle that is comfortable, beneficial, and exciting for me. So when it comes to men coming into my life, what's interesting is that I'm of the belief that if a man's going to be in my life and he's occupying a space that could be considered intimate to a certain degree, he needs to be making my life easier. Just because a woman is able to sustain herself doesn't mean that there are not areas that could be made easier. And what that looks like is, if you're going to be here hanging around, enjoying the exciting energy of talking to a sexy woman who we both know is out of your league, then you're going to need to pay your tithes. You need to pay your dues here. So you can pay my rent. You can send me cash for shopping. And I know this sounds ridiculous and unrealistic, but to give context here, about maybe 2 years ago, I decided to become a dominatrix. I still consider myself quite early in that journey, but what's very fascinating from what I've noticed is it's not about asking men to do things for you. It's about telling them to do it for you with the belief and the faith that they're going to do it. It's almost like that man should feel flattered that you would even think he's capable enough to do that for you. Because depending on what you've asked that man to do for you, it implies that he has the ability. So if you've asked a man, hey, I've got this shelf that I've ordered and I really need it to be built, can you help me? He's going to feel flattered that you think he can help him. Of course, if he loves you or if he likes you, he's going to want to help you. Or if you say to a guy, it would really turn me on if you bought me this bag. If he likes you and if it's within his means, he's going to do it. Now, the issue here that a lot of women worry about or encounter is this idea of, well, if a man is financially providing for me, then doesn't this mean that I'm trapped and I owe him things? But the issue with that sentiment that I find is, if you have your own money, the man is not doing anything that you can't already do for yourself. He's just temporarily alleviating that weight. If he decides that he doesn't want to do it anymore, you're not going back to zero. You're going back to what you were already doing by yourself. For me as well, the reason why I'm so hell-bent on this particular idea that a man needs to be making himself financially useful to me is because we live in a world where women are already socioeconomically disadvantaged. And for me, I've had to sit and ask myself, what's going to make it worth it for me to lay with a man? Especially if that could result in me being pregnant, or if I decide I'm going to marry him, what's going to make it worth it? Because men can be a bit gross sometimes, like they can smell, or if they like shave their beards and then leave the hair clippings in the sink. You know, when a man enters your feminine space, you can tell that a man has been here. So for me, when I ask myself, what's going to make all of that worth it? The man needs to be making my life financially easier. Now, there could be another argument that, well, a man who is able to pay all of your bills and take care of you and send you money for shopping and fly you wherever you want to go, those are only the 1%ers. That is propaganda that poor men have created to scare women out of having high standards. And also, I don't even consider it a high standard to expect a man to provide, because the role has been imposed on women that we are here to be the primary caretakers of children. We are here to not just carry children, but squeeze them out of a tight hole. Shout out to the tight pussy. But squeeze them out of a tight hole. And then on top of that, we also, most times, especially in the Black community, we end up being the primary providers as well. So if a woman is able to not just bear a child, grow the bones of that child in her body, push that child out, breastfeed the child, sustain the child, raise the child, and financially provide, are you telling me that is too much for a man to financially provide? It's not too much. And the idea that they only exist in the 1%, propaganda, because actually the 1% we're referring to is billionaires. A man doesn't need to be a billionaire for him to be able to provide for you, himself, and if you decide to start with him, a family. There are men who are making upwards 6 figures who can more than provide enough for you, himself, and the women that he might be cheating on you with.
Okay,
So
but
I
are
think
those
that
men that are but are those men providers? Yes. What about what else they provide outside of the financials? Because like you can have that, but then you don't have a man that is, an emotional support for you. You don't have a man that communicates, that provides these other, I think, valuable things as well. Especially because as an alpha woman, I can provide these things for myself. So
yes.
So at what point does the finances not even actually matter? Because I could buy the bag myself. So you could buy it, and then I didn't pay for it, and I saved $1,000, and that's
right.
cute. But then when I'm going through something and I need support and I need someone to help give me guidance, and you don't
support
have that,
and ease,
and you don't have that quality, then what does it mean? Because
do you not believe that there's such thing as a man who has the financial stability to support in that way, and also the emotional maturity and capacity to support in that way as well? Do you think that is just? I mean, I know that we've been told that that's just basically you're going to find a unicorn. It's a rarity. It's very rare. But I'm wondering if that's what you believe, because do you think that's generally the case?
You talking to me?
Yeah.
Oh, like that. Oh, I thought you were talking that I can't find both.
Like that coexist.
No, I think that they both exist, but I think they do. I think it's rare.
Mm-hmm.
I think that a lot of times men have put so much pressure in being providers that they haven't put any attention into how to be emotionally available, how to, and then a lot of times they don't even know themselves because they've been put into this workforce of I need to provide, that they have no connection to their who they are, their body. even like especially sexually, like there's a lot of
Their
dysfunction.
trauma.
There's a lot of dysfunction that happens. There's a lot. I've had men that could provide. Even like my baby daddy, like, is he emotionally mature? No, I could probably still be there right now and be having my rent paid and have a G-Wagon and do all the things and and have my family together. But am I emotionally provided for? And for me, like, I think I agree with you to an extent, but I also know that like the emotional part of the relationship and the connection and the friendship, to me, is more sustainable than anything a man could provide me. And I'm not trying to like overshadow, like blanket what you feel, because I do have questions about like what about the men that are not financial providers, right? Or can't, or maybe don't make as much as you, but are going to cook you meals every single day when you wake up. Are going to cook, when the moment you wake up, you have fucking coffee on your bedside, breakfast is made, trash is taken out.
Sounds like the chef and the nanny. Check, check.
Like, I'm like, is that something that you would ever compromise that part of your belief system for, or is the financials number one for you?
Is that of value to you?
That's a beautiful question. And to address your main concern about the emotional aspect of having a provider partner, what I found in my experience of being around men is I've had to acknowledge and accept that emotional territory is not men's strength. Like, if I want a support animal, I'm better off getting an animal. I'm not trying to say that that's what you're looking for, that's what you prefer, but it's the sarcasm of trying to point at what's happening here, where I think for a lot of women, I don't think it's a mistake, but I think that when we expect for men to have the emotional insight that we do, it can feel more disappointing for us. And this is why I believe strongly in community. Like, for example, if I was dating a man, or if I was partnered with a man to enough of a degree where I feel impacted by his behavior, one of my core beliefs is I don't really believe in crying to a man about how badly he's treating you. I believe in taking those emotions, processing it maybe with your female friends or with someone that you trust that is not that man. And by the time you've processed it, when you've come to him to address the concerns, you're coming at it from a very level-headed and self-controlled stance. Now, when it comes to the emotions, I just think that that's not men's strength. And
I don't necessarily mean, like, yes, but
I get what
at
you're
the
saying,
end of the day, like, you're not, I would hope that the person you're laying next to, you can have, that they can be your friend and they're not just...
Oh, of course, at the bare minimum. I mean, a man who is taking care of me financially, he's not someone that hates me, clearly. Like, I think I get what you're saying, though, because oftentimes when we look at providers as a concept, it is this sort of mechanical thing of he's simply providing the money. There is no connection outside of that. When actually, in my experience, the men who have provided for me are men who have been very fond of me while things were good. Emphasis on while things were good, because men can switch up on you and they will at some point, and it's not your fault. It's just a man is gonna man. But to answer your second portion of your point, where you were talking about, what about if a man hasn't got money, but he's a great cook and he's just there for you? This is where the roster comes in, because one man can't be everything for you. And this is the part where I actually agree that maybe we are putting too much pressure on men by expecting them to be everything. So how about we diversify the roles? That way, one man doesn't feel pressured to be everything. But when I say that I do get some pushback sometimes from men and women, because it's this whole idea of like, you know, people do value monogamy and people value that intimacy and that sacredness of one-to-one relationship. And I get that, but it's a man. And for me, I've kind of trained myself to acknowledge and accept, because acceptance is key in everything, right? I've acknowledged and I've accepted a man is only going to operate at such a high level. Like, there's only so much a man can do for me. Because even when it comes to money, like, money isn't everything, but love isn't everything either. That's why I feel like I need both. And for me, it's like there's various features of men that I come across in different guys. And I'm like, oh, I like that about him, but I like this about this guy. So maybe the guy who isn't got any money for me, but he can do my... Do you guys have Vinted in the States? Or like Depop?
Yeah, like Poshmark?
Yeah, so like he can do my Poshmark parcels for me because that's, you know, he wants to be useful to me and that's endearing that he wants to do that for me. Another guy who's got money, but you know what? We don't have that kind of intimacy. I don't think I see him as a boyfriend, but if you want to do stuff for me, I'm more than willing to accept your help in that way. Maybe another guy who's connected in the industry and he's just like an angel for me in the industry where he just, maybe I'm his +1 for certain events and he gets me in certain rooms or he speaks my names in rooms that I'm not in yet. So I like to see men as opportunities to improve my life as opposed to seeing men as a romantic happy ending, because in the end it's still just a man. And I know that sounds so bleak and so dull and like, oh, what about true love? And it's like, it's a man. I mean, men don't sit there longing about true love.
I feel like that goes both ways. We're human. You know, we're human, and I think we both, especially women, put so much into being everything for men because society puts a lot of pressure on us to do that. Like, we have to be the prettiest, we have to suck the best dick, you know, we have to be the sexiest, but we also can't be too sexy. You got to be like a conservative sexy, but you can't be a gold digger, but you got to be successful, and you got to like ask for stuff and get stuff, but not too much stuff because you have to have their own. Like, there's all these things, and if a guy looks at another bitch, even though he's going to, because there's 1,000 beautiful bitches, then suddenly we're like, we're not enough. You know what I mean? And I think vice versa. I think we all have to remove this idea that humans are going to check off every fucking box because we're going to fuck it up. At some point, we're going to disappoint each other. You know, like, I'm going to do some hoe shit. You're going to fucking do some hoe shit because, you know, we're some hoes because we're human and we have like animalistic, you know, eyes. We have fucking eyes and there's like desires and there's lust. And I think that especially women have been so deeply programmed by like this fairy tale Disney fucking princess bullshit that we're like, I'm gonna be swept off my feet and he's never gonna look at another woman again and we're gonna have a picket fence and he's gonna only want to kiss me in the mouth and we're gonna get married and my hair is gonna be pretty. And it's like, no, bitch, like, yes, that could be possible, and there's going to be other bitches. There's going to be opportunities.
And check his phone.
There's going to be lies, you know? And like on both ends, you know? So, but I think women fuck up really. I think men kind of have a more realistic idea that like, yeah, I love you, bitch, but I'm going to probably go to the DR and find a bigger booty bitch and I might, you know, I don't know.
Yeah,
what
men always choose themselves. That's one thing I've learned from men.
That's true.
That's true.
But they've learned to choose themselves without guilt. And when we choose ourselves, there's so much shame attached to it. And so you can't even choose yourself in fucking peace. You know, men are just out here choosing themselves, leaving their kids, not giving 3 fucks because there's no emotion or energy attached to it because of the patriarchy. But as women, it's like, and that's what we were even talking about our show being called Bad Choices. Like, I know you said your mom made some bad choices, but a part of the reason we named our show Bad Choices is because some of this shit is not bad. We've been told it's bad, but sometimes what I need to do to choose myself is not necessarily bad, and you have to kind of figure out what that fucking means for you. And I think women have been so long in this journey of like, this is what it looks like to be a good girl, this is what it looks like to be a good wife and to be accepted, you know, like, no, bitch, guys want the girl who's, you know, they want the porn star, but they don't want to marry the porn star, but they're cheating on you with the porn star. So it's like very confusing, you know. But I feel like women need to like kind of wake up out of the fucking fairy tale and realize, bitch, you know, let's have some like realistic expectations for everybody, for all parties involved. Would you say your ideal relationship is like not monogamous?
That's an interesting question because when I think about the concept of an ideal relationship, I don't even know what it is anymore. Like, for me, I'm a very selfish woman. I date men very selfishly. My ideal relationship is a man who's just, yes, princess. Are you sure? Are you sure you don't want it in another color as well?
Are you in a relationship? Are you in a relationship right now?
I'm not in a relationship at the moment. No.
When was the last time you were in a relationship and how long was it?
I was talking about this today to a friend actually. The last relationship / also the last guy I slept with was in 2021.
So you haven't had sex in 3 years?
Quite literally.
Okay, celibate for 3 years.
That okay? Silent killer.
No dick. I just want to be clear. No.
Let me light this joint for you. I'm lighting this for you.
I'm gonna send it
please,
from
girl.
California to London.
I'm gonna light this for your pussy, Shadira. This is for your
girl.
pussy.
This is a blunt for that
You know what's
pussy.
interesting, right? it's been 3 years, and it's not even, I wouldn't even call it a celibacy journey. I'm not celibate. It's just that I'm so aware of the reality of men that I don't feel turned on by men unless they give me a very good reason to be turned on. And nowadays, what turns me on, this is going to sound so bad for lack of a better word, but this is my truth. What turns me on is when a man sends me money. Like, I feel the moisture between my legs when a man sends me money. I'm like, oh my God, it's go time. You actually sent it? Mm. Like, I'm not turned on by...
How did we get here? How did we get here? I want to know about your childhood. I want to know how,
Yes.
who was baby Shadira? What kind of family dynamic did you grow up to become this feminist who wants men for checks and not for any other reason? I'm curious.
And I don't need to have sex for 3 years unless you're really, really busting the check. And even then, maybe not. Probably not.
I want to know, like, what was your family dynamic growing up?
Thank you for that question. So earlier on in this conversation, I touched on the fact that I really empathize and understand my mother. She made, in my opinion, bad choices. And the bad choices I was referring to is growing up, I had a severely controlling mother, and she was angry at me a lot. And now that I'm an adult and I'm old enough to potentially be a mother, and I look at the things that she was angry at a child for, it's disproportionate. It didn't make any sense to me that a mother would be so angry at her child, so controlling. The punishments I would receive didn't match the thing that I did. I've genuinely, in my experience and from my personal opinion, growing up as a child, I felt like I was in a very emotionally and physically abusive upbringing with my mother. And as I get older and I start to speak to more women who have become mothers, I'm joining the dots and I'm recognizing that this is a woman who had dreams, had passions, and societal programming and propaganda convinced her to believe that she will find deep purpose and meaning through having children, and it will give her a sense of identity that she doesn't need to create because the children will give her identity. And so things were all well and good when I was a baby and I didn't have much autonomy because I was just cute and I relied entirely on her. But as I started to develop complex thoughts, that was when my relationship with my mother started to become more difficult, where even though I did my best to be such a good girl, like I was the exemplar child, aunties would look at the way I'd behave and they would compliment and praise my mother on what a good job she's done to raise such an obedient daughter. When the reality is the root of my obedience was fear of my mother, coupled with Nigerian culture, which is where I'm from Nigeria. Nigerian culture, which is incredibly patriarchal and misogynistic. The idea that you must remain a virgin until you're married. The idea that women are given punishments and are expected to uphold accountability, but men are not necessarily raised the same way. And as someone that was raised in a household with two younger brothers, I saw how that difference was in my brother's relationship with my mum versus my relationship with my mum. And I'm now in my 6th year of not speaking to my mother. And I made that choice to disown my mother. And it's something that I radically and deeply stand by. A lot of people do preach the idea of forgiveness. And even now that I'm in a headspace where I've come to understand why my mother is the way she is, I still don't forgive her. And that has been very empowering for me to separate myself from her. And so how this links into the way that I approach my dealings with men is, to put it quite plainly, if I can cut off my own mother, who is the most important and the most foundational attachment I could ever have in this lifetime, then what is a man? Like, my ability to walk away from men who make me feel upset or who are not of any use to me or who are lingering in my life longer than they should is a quick decision. And it's not because I'm like, ooh, toxic, ooh, you can't be grown up enough to have a conversation. It's more from recognizing that people don't deserve to loiter in your life if you recognize that they are bringing more harm than good. And for me, cutting off my mother has allowed me to protect myself from potential abuse. Because what I notice as a pattern is women who approach me with the craziest of stories pertaining to things they've experienced at the hands of men, more times than not, they had a relationship with one of their parents that is abusive and they're probably still in contact with that parent. Most times it's the mother that they're in contact with who is the abusive parent. And they're trying to find ways to just force this foot into the shoe. You know, you're really trying to make it work and you're trying to work around your mother. But in you absorbing that abuse from your mother, you're still creating room for your body to recognize abuse and see it as familiar. And I know that it's not for everyone to cut their mother off. Not everybody has the resources or safety or convenience or emotional strength to do so. But for anybody who might be listening, who is either considering cutting their mother off or who has cut their mother off, I deeply salute you. It is the hardest decision any human being can make. And it was not an easy decision. From the age of 7, I knew that I don't like my mom because she made me feel so deeply hurt through doing things like, imagine your child doing something like forgetting to wash the plates or just not following through on an order you've given her, and you choose to stop speaking to her in the same house you're living in for 3 days. Like, my mum would physically ghost me. And as a child, I didn't have enough brain cells to process this ghosting as some sort of response to me doing something she didn't like. I processed and understood it as, I am a bad child. I inherently believed that I was bad. So I didn't associate my mother with peace and serenity and safety. Anytime I was on my way home, I felt like my body was physically producing the fight or flight symptoms of an increase in my heartbeat, a sense of feeling like I need to lie about something I haven't even done yet because I know I'm in trouble. That feeling of, I feel like I'm in trouble, but I don't know what I've done, but I feel like I'm in trouble. Imagine feeling that every single day while under the primary care of your mother. And my mother, like I touched on earlier, is also an alpha woman. And so my dad had no ability to protect me from my mother because
they were
she
together.
Would also...
Your parents were married.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Are they still married?
No, not anymore. But like a 20-something year partnership where my mother would exert that same dominion over my dad. And I think it's interesting because my dad's a Pisces and my mom's like on the Cancer Gemini cusp.
Oh my God,
so
when's your mom's birthday?
Men, 21st of June, girl.
Oh, she's Jamila. Your mother is
22nd.
Jamila.
No, I'm not her mother. Hold on.
But what's interesting, right, is like, what's interesting is that my dad is such a classic Pisces. Like, with all respect and love to my dad, and he knows this about himself too, Pisces men are not the men who are going to fight back. Like, they kind of just take it.
My
they
brother,
just
my
passive.
stepdad, no.
Please.
Wow.
Fight for me. So I had to, I cut my own dad off for 5 years, and then it wasn't until the past, maybe a year ago plus, that I finally forgave him. But I made him work for that forgiveness. With my mother, she's not redeemable because she's actually not changed in any way. And this is why it's hard, because it's like, I think she is a good mother in the definition of her version of good, because she sacrificed herself for the ability to be this like ever providing mother for her children. In her definition, she's a good mother. But in my definition, it's hard to say it because it doesn't sound very nice. It doesn't feel nice to say either. But how I see this is, so I went to fashion school, right? And you would spend hours, probably half a day, sewing a garment only to realize you've accidentally sewn it inside out. Nobody is going to come and say, congratulations on sewing your garment inside out. It's still fit for the runway. You're going to have to unstitch it all and start again. And this metaphor to me points to, you could think you're doing a great job as a mother, but sometimes the damage is done. And when your adult children grow up and decide they don't want to speak to you, and it feels hard to say this because you're both mothers, but I feel like it's important for you to hear this from an adult child because you're one day going to have adult children. But if your adult child has decided to not speak to you, something has gone wrong on your part as the parent. And that might be hard to hear for mothers listening to this, because I also at the same time believe in the idea that we should respect our mothers. They gave us life. And I deeply do respect mothers, including my own mother. I respect my mother enough to not cuss her out. I'd rather cut her off than cuss her out because I respect her. I respect my mother enough to, even when I'm speaking about her on a public domain like this, I hold space for the reality that she was doing what she thought was her best. But like I said, with sewing that garment, you could spend 12 hours sewing a garment, but if it's inside out, you have to start again. So for me, I feel like I'm the outcome of, you've sewn the garment inside out, but you refuse to start again because you've given all this time to it. And now you're like, well, I did my best and you're going to have to just deal with it. I'm your mother. And it's like, you know what? There are mothers who make that mistake. And unfortunately, it's not redeemable. And sometimes I feel bad for my mother. Not bad enough to go and start talking to her because that's harmful for me. But I feel bad for her knowing that, like, wow, you're still alive. So you still have time to recognize where you've gone wrong. But it's too painful to look into where you went wrong. Because if you start to probe into where you went wrong as a mother, you also have to probe into your own identity and what went wrong in your upbringing, which means you have to also look into what happened to your mother. And that is a generational, like, it's like a generational layer of trauma that you have to start unpacking. And most women who are born in the 60s, 70s are not prepared to do that because it's painful. But it's not an excuse. It's just like you're going to have to accept that the outcome of you refusing to acknowledge that painful discomfort is you losing your child. You losing your child while they're still alive. And it's painful for both of us, but I'd rather live with the pain of never speaking to my mother again than to live with the pain of having my mother in my life, because that's how dangerous she is for my mental health and my well-being.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I think a lot of times as women, or just in general, we hear about women having daddy issues. We always hear about women having daddy issues, but the mother-daughter dynamic is a very complex one, and it generally, yeah, you're just supposed to love and respect your mother, but there's this dynamic, and I remember thinking that about my dad, like, I know you see this shit, like, why aren't you saying anything? And thinking, like, he would like disappear. He was trying to get out too, but I couldn't leave, and I was like, damn, that's weak. Like, you can leave, I can't. But also just like this the idea that you sometimes go into adult relationships allowing people to diminish your character or talk down to you or whatever, because that's the relationship you have with your mother, and that's truly the most formative. And like sometimes the niggas we date are actually reflecting our mothers, but we're so busy thinking it's daddy issues that we're not really thinking about, like, damn, how did my mom talk to me? How did that build my self-esteem? How does, like, you know, and I'm still in a relationship with her because me and my mom have had a complex relationship, and now it's much better, but it's taken a long time. But back to what you said about, like, most women of a certain age don't even have the wherewithal to start even peeling back the layers of what kind of mother did I receive and how is that affecting how I'm parenting and how I show up, because it's so painful. Like, they literally cannot do it. They would rather just not talk to their kid and be like, it's her. And like sometimes it's cultural. It is cultural. I'm high. Cultural.
You got this.
Cultural. But, you know, but I'm wondering, hearing you say this, what along your journey with this mother, because I'm always curious about that too. We're all like particular women telling our business, you know, on a public platform, something that we've, you know, for the most part been told is bad, not to tell your business, not to say anything, you know, outside of the box. But like what point in your growth and your being raised that you said, you know what? I can't do this shit anymore, and I'm good, and I'm going to stand on that, and I know what my family might say about me, and I know what it's going to look like and what people are going to tell me, but I'm okay with, like, this boundary, even with this person who's the closest to me, because I understand how harmful that is to me, because I know so many people, children who will never make that decision because of just the standard of the parent, you know, the parent-child dynamic. So I'm just wondering, what was that moment for you, like, this is that important?
That's a powerful question. And for me, the whole reason why I even have a career now is because this whole thing started out as my exit plan to get away from my mum. I thought, you know what? Okay, it's the beginning of do you remember back before we had influencers, there were bloggers, like fashion bloggers. I used to be a fashion blogger. This was before influencers started to become an established thing. So this would have been back in maybe like 2014, 2015. I would have been in my super early 20s. And back then, you weren't really getting paid to do anything, but you get gifted like a shoe or a bag and you're like, whoa, this is major. And so as things started to slowly evolve, I started to make a little bit of money here and there until one day I landed an Adidas campaign, and it was a billboard campaign. And back then, Adidas paid me £25,000. And I was like, this is the biggest money I've ever gotten in my life. And that was when I was like, I'm 22 and I've just landed this Adidas campaign. I'm not going to tell my mother how much I've made from it. Because from early on, once I started making some money, I started to learn to not tell my mum how much I'm making because she would financially abuse me. And what I mean by the financial abuse is she would make me buy things for her because she knew I had money, and I wasn't in enough of a position to say no because I'm living in her house. And you know what it's like for anybody who's listening. If you're living with somebody who is emotionally or even physically / both abusive, saying no is not an option. It's easier and more peaceful to just go along with it. And that's how the abuse evolves. So for me, I learned, okay, once I got this Adidas campaign, I'm going to save all of the money, and that's going to be my year's rent for wherever I'm going to move to. So I was secretly booking viewings for flats with estate agents, whispering on the phone to take these calls. And then one day I found the flat, which I'm still living at now, that I thought, this is going to motivate me to want to stay here because it's a beautiful 1-bedroom riverside apartment in a part of London that I really like being in. And so once I signed the papers to start renting the flat, it was after I signed that I told my mother that I'm moving out. And I got the most diabolical response from her. Initially, she pretended to be okay with it, but I knew that it wasn't genuine. And then a day later, I got maybe like 250 plus messages of abuse from her via WhatsApp, of her calling me all the worst things. The one that stood out the most to me that I'll never forget is she said to me that she hopes that if I love someone, that they never love me back. And she hopes that if I was to decide to become pregnant, she hopes that I experience complications so that I can see how hard it is to be a mother. And after her saying all of that amongst 200 and something other messages, I knew that I'm done. I can't do this. And there's still things that I left behind at her house that I haven't gone back to get because I would rather say goodbye to those designer, amazing one-of-one things that I've been gifted over the years or that I've bought with my money back in the day than to go back and face her. I've actually not seen her face to face since I cut her off 6 years ago. And for me, that decision to finally bite the bullet came from, first of all, years of preparation to even feel brave enough to do it. Because any person who is living in an abusive situation knows that just leave is not that simple. You have to mentally leave first and then you physically leave later. So what mentally leaving first looks like is I started doing therapy because I knew that something was wrong, but I kept it a secret that I was in therapy because culturally, African mothers, and I think this is similar with Caribbean parents as well, but there's this stigma attached to therapy. The immediate response that you get from an African parent when you tell them that you're in therapy, which is the response I got from my mother, was, so you're telling your therapist about me, which is interesting because she kind of told on herself by assuming that I'm going to therapy because of her. And it's like, well, yes, I literally am.
Yeah.
Like, girl, you're the reason I'm paying £60 per 1 hour therapy session. I spent 6 years in therapy, and for the first maybe 2 years of therapy, I was psyching myself up to leave. And when I finally left, I felt really bad. I felt so guilty. I felt all of the feelings that any person who's left their abuser would feel. The feeling of, oh my goodness, like I've harmed the person who has been psychologically harming me for all these years by removing myself from their ability to harm me. But as time passed and I started to experience more harassment from her, it was, because when you move out and separate yourself from an abuser, just because you've physically moved away doesn't mean that it's going to end. Like, they will still be calling you to harass you, whatever they can do to get into your head and ruin your day. That was what my mother was doing for years. Until this day, she chooses Christmas and birthdays to try and rattle me. But I've become so strong now where it doesn't affect me anymore in the way that it used to. It's disappointing knowing that my mother is never going to be in a place where I'm going to get the apology that I deserved. Because again, for my mother to even apologize to me, she would need to first of all accept that there's something that she needs to be sorry for. And for her to accept that there's something she needs to be sorry for, she needs to believe that she's flawed. My mother, according to her, has no flaws whatsoever. People who are capable of emotionally harming their children in this way, they don't believe that they're in the wrong. And so you get to a stage as an adult child where you start to understand your mother or whoever the parent was that did this to you. You genuinely start to understand them from a place of, this person does not have the capacity to operate at the level of self-awareness that I have developed from therapy and from being accountable. So with that being kept in mind, it would be ridiculous of me to sit around waiting for her to one day just realize all of the things she did wrong as a mother. That's not going to happen. And so I've had to make my own peace with that. And it's hard because, you know, I've had well-meaning people, both my age and elders, say to me, you know, one day you're going to regret not speaking to your mom. You know, time is going, your mom's getting older. And I find that really hard to hear because people don't say to mothers who have pushed their children far enough away for them to not speak to them anymore that one day your kid might die while you're alive and you're not going to get to be able to tell your kids all the things that you're sorry for. You know, a lot of the weight and emphasis is placed on the adult child, and it's deeply painful to hear that. I think another thing that's really hard to hear or really hard to come to terms with is, you know, like, I don't wish my mother any ill, but, you know, one day I might get a phone call of the inevitable bad news, and I will have to live with the choice that I made to not speak to her. And I don't know how I'm going to navigate that when it happens, but what I do know is that I made this choice for a reason, and my relationship with my mother is personal and unique to me. So however I decide to grieve that, whether it's me grieving the absence of our relationship or me grieving her not being on this planet anymore, depending on whichever one of us goes first, whatever I'm grieving, it has to come from a place of acceptance and knowing that I made this decision to protect myself. And weirdly enough, even though cutting off my mother for her bad choices is the hardest thing I've done, it's also the best ever thing I've done for myself, because sometimes when your mother speaks words into you, those words carry power. So if your mother is speaking life into you, you feel more empowered to navigate the world. When your mother is speaking negativity and downsizing you and using painful words to cut you down for her to find you more malleable for her abuse, that affects the way you view yourself in relation to the world. And so once I cut my mother off, I started to slowly become more confident in myself. And I feel very proud of the strength that I have, that if I can endure the wound of cutting off my own mother, like, I could probably fight a bear with my own hands, you know. Like, it's that kind of mental belief of I can do anything. I can do hard things. I can live with the pain of cutting my mother off at such a young age and maintaining that choice throughout my ongoing life. And, you know, the same mental strength applies to when I go to dance classes and I struggle with orientation and picking up choreography, but I remind myself I can do hard things. I cut my own mum off, so I can learn this dance routine, because it's the same faculty of the brain in you telling yourself you can't do it. Because oftentimes the voice that we have that tells us we can't do it is one of our parents' voices. And my mum, I know that she struggled a lot with perfectionism, and that imposed self-perfectionism, she projected that onto me. And I know she wasn't doing it to be evil. This is the thing, like, when we're discussing people who abuse others, when I think about the mindset of somebody who's capable of doing that to their own child, I don't necessarily think that all of them give birth to a child and they're like, right, can't wait to abuse you and completely disassemble your character. It's coming from a place of, I'm deeply scared of the world and I want to protect you, so I'm going to overcompensate. But also I'm kind of jealous of you because I've birthed you into a country and an array of opportunities that I never had. And as you grow older, I start to see more of myself in you as my child. And I start to see that you are excelling in ways that I didn't get to at your age. And you've now reached the age that I was when I had you. And I didn't get to do those things for myself, but you get to live this free life for yourself, partially because I raised you in a safe environment, but also because I birthed you in a country where you have opportunities. And I'm jealous. Like, those things are multiple themes happening where mothers can be jealous of their daughters as well. And that was something that I dealt with deeply. And so now that I'm detached from my mother, and this is why I found it so important to have this conversation with you both on this podcast, because this genuinely feels like a really safe space to have this conversation. And this is my first time genuinely talking about this at this level of length. Like, for years, I stopped even mentioning my mother. Even on my own podcast, I don't talk about my mother because I feel this sense of, it's so ironic, right? Like, the desire to protect your abuser, and even calling her abuser feels uncomfortable because it's not like the whole time I was in her care, she was just abusing me, but it's like, it was enough abuse for me to call it abuser. But like, for a long time, I felt very protective of her because I understand what went wrong. But I know that if I'm having a conversation with two strong, beautiful, understanding, intelligent Black women who are also mothers, the context of the conversation is different because the nature of your audience largely is mothers. And there is still time for anybody who's listening who is a mother. There is still time to repair the damage that you might have done. It will be uncomfortable, but there's nothing more uncomfortable than losing access to your child while they're still alive. Like, you're probably better off having a child who is physically dead so that you can make peace with knowing that you're never going to hear from them. But to have a child who's still alive and you can sometimes see them on the internet or you hear about them through relatives, that I can't even imagine how painful that must be for my mother. But that's a choice that she made, and she's going to have to live with that choice, just like I have to live with the choice of disowning my own mother.
Wow.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you for your vulnerability, for your just how eloquently you've shared such a vulnerable, major piece of who you are and how you show up. It's really like, I'm almost like moved to tears thinking, like listening to you as a mother, because I can't imagine what that feels like and how incredibly challenging that has to be, and thinking about, yes, it is not your responsibility. You are the child. And how many mothers listening who are mothers have been you also, and are now even having to self-regulate in that space, the overcompensating and what that looks like, being a victim of something like that. So I thank you so much for sharing that, because I just want everyone listening to really, really contemplate how whether that's shown up in your life, whether it's playing out in your life right now, and how do you shift? How do you acknowledge? How do you begin the steps of forgiveness, of acknowledgement, all of it, and thank you for sharing all of it.
Thank you for listening.
And I'm curious, because I think Mila's right. Like, this is you think about daddy issues. That's always like the topic of conversation. And we don't really talk about how mommy issues show up in your dating life, because, you do comment on, most of your commentary is in dating, a lot of dating and female empowerment and coming back to yourself and then acting on that. But how do you think, personally, these things showed up for you prior to cutting her off? I don't know. Maybe you can share both, how your mommy issues or these things have impacted you in your dating. Because I think a lot of people haven't, like she said, even thought about it. Like, it's either like, oh, it's him, or these are my daddy issues showing up. Like, how has that shown up for you?
That's such an incredible question, because when I think about how my mommy issues showed up for me in my dating experiences with men, where the main issues affected me in relation to dating men was constantly feeling like I need to prove I'm lovable by being useful to men. Because for me to get my mother's love and appraisal and approval was when I achieved things, or when I was obedient to her in a way that betrayed myself. And so when I then think about how those behaviors reflected in the ways that I would navigate being around men, I found myself overcompensating with men. I found myself deliberately gravitating towards broke men who can't do anything for me, because I felt like I could control them to a certain degree, in knowing that, well, you haven't got money, so you don't really have much of an option here, do you? Like, you kind of have to be with me, because like, who's really going to pick you? Like, like, I kind of saw it in that way. But then what was interesting was that I was still allowing myself to be terrorized by broke men who couldn't do anything for me. And I place a lot of emphasis on broke men, because when men don't have money, they are very foul to be around, largely because most men build their self-esteem on their money, their success, their achievements, and money plays a huge role in a man's identity. And so when I would gravitate towards these men, I would project these dreams onto them of, one day when you get your money up and you improve thanks to me building you, then this is going to be the amazing relationship we'll have. I felt this desire and need to build men, because it almost felt like I'm being useful. I'm earning the love. I'm making sure this man feels like he can't not love me, because look at all I've done for you. But what's interesting as well, in terms of how my influence of my mother impacts the way that I navigate men now is, so most of the traits that I admire about myself, ironically, come from my mother. So my mum is a very stylish woman. Like, I remember when she'd come to pick me up from school, primary school. So this is like the age of 10 and under. And I used to initially feel so embarrassed that she'll be the mother coming up with like the short skirt and like boobs sitting up because she had her boobs done. And like, she always just looked so nice. And I felt embarrassed because I'm like, oh my God, my mom's overdressed to come get me. But now that I'm older, I'm like, that's iconic. But even my mom's way of, like the way my mom talked to men, like sometimes I follow my mom to the butcher's or the market, and I would observe the way that she would navigate talking to men to get her way. Through a child's ears, I would just hear her playfully flirting with these men. But now that I'm an adult and I look back, I'm like, oh, she was so smart. She knew how to play the game to get a discount on the meat. That is so smart. And even the directness in which I saw my mom speak to men who would be trying to chat her up, that was where I slowly started to pick up, oh, okay, this sassy persona. Another thing my mom always said to me, which is funny that she would say that to me as a child, from one of my earliest memories of having deep conversations with my mother would be her saying to me, my daughter, if I die, promise me that you will not marry poor. And it always stuck with me because it's like, that's interesting that my mom's like hypothetical dying wish, parting wish, the last thing she could ever say to her daughter is, do not marry a broke man. And at first I found it ridiculous. I'm like, yeah, oh God, that really stuck. And I'm sure a psychologist or therapist listening would have some fascinating commentary on that, because isn't it ironic that like the woman who completely destroyed my self-esteem is also the woman who taught me to have self-esteem pertaining to men. And it's funny that stuck, her whole idea of like, do not marry poor, because on the surface of hearing that, it sounds so, oh my God, that's so materialistic and that's so vapid. But when I think about the reality of it coming from a mother who was the primary caregiver of 3 children and who also was, I think she was the breadwinner when I look back, it makes sense that she would say to her daughter, when you grow up and you're of age to be married, don't marry poor, because she's probably speaking from the experience of having done this all by herself pretty much, and her saying that this will be easier for you if you marry a man who can at least take care of you. That's my understanding of her saying that. And so what's interesting about my mother and how that has impacted the way that I navigate being around men is that my mother was always a woman growing up who would tell me all these stories of like men that she had flings with and dated, and she was always the victor in her story. Like she always got her way with these men, and I was always inspired by that. And so even now when I'm dominating men, it's so funny, right? When I'm dominating men, I take on a satirical version of my mother. I take inspiration from the punishments my mom gave me when I'm punishing these men, like, because it's funny. Because the thing about dominating men is
healing in a way, almost?
Definitely.
Yeah, I would imagine.
It's like double healing because the spirit of my mother still lives in me, but it's also healing to dominate men, because it's like, yeah, like after all men have done to us, we deserve to boss them around a bit. But why it's also healing is because I don't entirely look at my mother through the lens of like hating her or being angry with her. I'm still not forgiving her, but it's like, for me to free myself, I've had to accept her. But acceptance doesn't mean enabling. Acceptance sometimes means taking everything for what it is and coming to a final conclusion that this situation is not going to change. So for your own sake of having peace, accept this person from afar. So I accept that I've gotten so many beautiful lessons from my mother. I get my face from my mother. I get my body from my mother. I get my ability to dance from my mother. I get my like really sharp and sort of edgy sense of humor from my mother. I also have gotten a lot of insults that I've taken on from her. She's somebody who is a very dynamic character, and I think it's that Gemini trait, because she's on the cusp of Cancer and Gemini, and I think that's a very diabolical.
Wait, what's your sign?
No offense I'm a Sagittarius, girl.
Oh, bitch, you fired. I have a question about this relationship and how it if and how it has impacted your relationship with women, because like I haven't really heard you talk a lot about your female friendships, and so I'm curious, are those how do they show up in your life?
So you've been asking so many beautiful questions today. Another beautiful question. What I deeply value about my female friendships is that I've chosen friends who, like, they really resonate with my inner child. I have the kind of female friendships where, like, we can party, but we can also, like, bitch about our mums on the phone if we need to. I have the kind of female friendships where I'm surrounded by deeply intellectual women. And that matters a lot to me because I consider myself quite an intellectual person. And what I love about my female friendships is, I think because I'm the kind of person where I think it's due to the abuse I endured for 20-something years from my mum, and also because I don't live with anybody, I'm so used to being by myself, and my friends really, like, accept me for that. They don't they don't express upset at me for not calling them or for not being in the group chat when the group chat is popping off. Sometimes I just go really quiet and they know that I'm just in my world, in my space. And that, I think that acceptance is very beautiful. Funny enough though, I do take on a very protective big sister role with my friends, even though some of them are older than me. When men come into the picture, I'm like, who is this guy? Tell me about him. Like, they always feel like a little...
way.
I know, right?
Shocker.
Surprising, right? What? Where would that come from? But, like, they be nervous to tell me about this guy. I'm like, oh, why do you like him? What's he done for you? Let me see. And normally these guys, some of them, they know of me. And I think because they know that I am the best friend of their girlfriend, I do think that these men, it kind of has made them sort of fall in line a bit, because they know that if you upset her, she's going to tell me, and I'm going to tell her to block you. So really and truly, is it in your interest to upset my friend? No. So I really do take on a very protective big sister kind of role in my friendships. But I think due to the abuse that I endured from my mother, a therapist would probably call this avoidant attachment. I don't really necessarily think I'm avoidant. I just think that when it comes to men, I have standards that most men can't meet. When it comes to friendships, I kind of I like to be in the moment and I disappear to my own little world. And I think it's because I have such a when I say suffocating mother, like, I wasn't allowed, even though I was maybe I lived with my mum till I was 22, I wasn't allowed to shower with the door locked because my mother had the belief that if I was secretly pregnant, she didn't want to miss it. So if she wanted to walk into the bathroom, if she wanted to walk into the bathroom while I'm showering, she would just do so. There were times, this is going to trigger warning, there were times my mother would say to me that she's going to check if I'm a virgin. There's only one way to check if someone is a virgin, and unfortunately that is assault. I didn't have bodily autonomy in my mother's household because genuinely, from my mother's perspective, I do believe, and this is something that is quite normal when an infant has just been born. Yes, for that first infancy period, the baby is technically an attachment to the mother. Like, they're both still one unit. The baby genuinely believes that it is a part of the mother. But after a while, the separation naturally happens. I don't think that separation happened for my mom. And it's hard because when I think about identity...
because you were so much of her identity. That's what she told
herself. I was her first child.
If that's what she
and I'm the girl.
Yeah, like, you're just going to take care of this little baby the rest of her life, and she's going to be my little baby, and she's going to be just like me and do what I say and do what I want and impress people and not disappoint me. And, So,
it's hard. It's hard because now when I think about friendships and men and identity, there are so many elements of myself that I've had to leave behind because I've realized that wasn't actually me. I was just responding to a traumatic environment. Like, this is something that, for anybody who's listening who is on the precipice of cutting off an abusive person, whether it's a parent or a partner, one stage that's going to be really uncomfortable is realizing that wasn't actually your personality. You were just responding to trauma. When you discover your real personality, you're going to grieve all the time you lost not being your authentic self. And it's hard because when you're existing in a situation where you exist in relation to your abuser. You're not your real self. You're a version of yourself you've had to create to survive that environment. But once the threat has been removed, you're now left with the responsibility to actually really probe and observe, who actually am I outside of responding to trauma? And that was something that I spent a long time realizing. And that's how I realized, oh, I do have ADHD. That's crazy. Oops. Like, I started to really almost unmask and allow myself to be me. And I realized, okay, there's a whole version of myself that I didn't know existed. And now I feel anger for all the times when I could have been myself, but I wasn't in an environment that would have allowed me to be myself. And so this calls into question, well, what is the purpose of a mother to an adult child? Because I still do think that adult children need their parents. We don't need our parents in the way we needed them when we were 10, but I do think that adult children need their parents in the form of a safe space. Like, the world is already hard enough as it is. And I think that the one thing that mothers can do for their children is to just be that unconditional safe space. But unconditional safe space doesn't mean enabling harmful or bad or rude behavior. I think it's just allowing your child to feel like they can actually come to you and tell you things. Because there were things that I really wanted to tell my mum that I couldn't tell her because I knew she would judge me. Like, when a guy sexually assaulted me, I didn't tell my mum. I kept it a secret. So she probably found out through me talking about it on YouTube somewhere on someone's podcast. And that's because she didn't create a safe environment. So technically, and this is going to be, I find this hard to say because I'm not a mother, but if I was to give my Yelp review on my parenting, I wouldn't give 5 stars. I would say, as a mother, if you have not created an environment where your child can feel safe to be around you, safe to tell you things that they've done that maybe they're not proud of. If your child doesn't feel safe to tell you something that they've done that's put them in danger, you failed as a parent. And I feel really scared saying that because there are parents who are going to be like, well, you don't get to say a mother has failed because you're not a mother. But what I'm trying to say is, from the perspective of having now grown into an adult child who is now articulate and old enough to look back on the parenting I received and give my humble review, I would say that where a lot of mothers go wrong is that they're so focused on trying to protect their daughters, rightfully so, from a very unsafe world, that they forget to be a safe space for their daughters. And I do think that mommy issues affect daughters more than daddy issues do, because the reason I say that is daddy issues pertains mainly to just validation of like, I really want my dad to tell me he loves me. But with mommy issues, it's like, that's the foundational structure that you've come from. So if your mom tells you that she hates you, that's going to cut way deeper, in my opinion, than your dad telling you that he hates you. Because that's who you've come from. That's the person who sets the tone for how you see yourself forever. That's the person whose voice you carry in your head. That's the person who, from an animalistic, instinctual level, if something scary is happening to you, out of instinct, you'll be like, mommy. You're not going to be like, daddy. Like, I can't imagine if a bear's coming to eat me, I'm going to be like, daddy. Like, no. As much as my dad, you know, he now plays a role in my life where I do feel like he's a safe space for me. If I was in a genuine animalistic environment where all of my instincts are firing off, as much as I'm not speaking to my mother, I will still shout mummy out of instinct, because on a like pineal gland level, mother is the protector. Mother is the person who I'm supposed to feel protected by. So if I don't have that protection on a foundational level, that can definitely, absolutely disassemble my sense of identity. So when women are walking around with a fractured sense of identity, of course they seek identity in relationships. And of course men are the gateway, because if men are giving you validation and they're telling you everything that you've ever wanted to hear, you're going to eat that shit right up. But if you learn how to form a strong, solid sense of identity outside of men, and you take what they're saying for what it is, because for me, when men are talking to me, I'm taking it with a very strong pinch of salt and seasoning. So I'm like, it's a man. And I know you want to see my tits. So I know you're telling me all these things because you know you want to see my boobs. So we'll see. You have to show me if this is true. But when men are talking to me, it's like, because I won't say I've repaired the mother wound, but I've made peace with that wound. Men can't get into my head using the tactics that anybody who knows a woman who's been abused by her mother would use. Similarly, it's like, it could be argued that I have daddy issues because I cut my dad off for 5 years, but we're good now. But it's like, I just think that whether you have a healed and completely quote unquote normal relationship with your parents or not, men are still going to try and get into your head. And this is why it's so important to fortify yourself mentally. If you're somebody who has endured abuse, doesn't mean that you're unlovable. It just means that you've unfortunately got extra work to do than everyone else, because you have to find a way to overcompensate in your own way for what you lacked. But men are not the vessel for that. Men are an accessory to the existing love you've created for yourself. So this is why I'm not in a place where I'm looking for love. I have love. I am loved. I'm loved by my dad. I'm loved by my relatives. I'm loved by my friends. I'm loved by myself. And I think the idea of a man's love being this cherry on top is us placing men's love on a pedestal, because most men don't even love themselves. And I've seen men that don't even love their children. They be walking out on their own children, let alone expecting a man to love me into fullness.
Right. I know.
A man.
That's a ladies, if you're listening, that nigga, if he's not in his child's life, baby,
he's not going to be a good friend.
What are
or
you
boyfriend.
doing? Like, what are don't the excuses?
You can't even have a homegirl that's not a good mom or a homeboy that's not a good dad, because he's going to not be a good friend.
Oh my God.
Mm-hmm. No parent, if you're not a good parent, you cannot be a good friend. It just scientifically does not exist. I always say that if you're an ain't shit mom or dad, and I'm like, where's your kid? And they're like, oh, with so-and-so, and I never seen you with your kid, I'm going to cut you off.
Yes.
Period.
Wait, ladies, I know we're running low on time. And before we run out of time, a few things. Number one, I want to play Trigger.
Okay.
I want to play Trigger.
Let's play a game.
Number two, did we pull a card?
I did.
We pulled a card. Okay. Number three, you have an affirmation for us? Because I feel like the people need. I feel like this whole thing has been an affirmation.
Truly.
But I don't know. I don't know if can you share an affirmation maybe with our audience?
My affirmation that I always repeat to myself and to anybody I meet is know your worth and act on it. Because know your worth is something we're always told. But the follow-up should be to act on it. Because you can know your worth in your head, but you're still in environments that don't reflect that worth. So acting on it means you taking radical action. And sometimes that action will not be very popular. It might not be comfortable. But if you're operating from a place of knowing your worth, then you're leading with the best possible intention for yourself. So my offering is know your worth and act on it.
Know your worth and act on it. Amen. Amen to that.
Lights blunt.
Right. That's how you know it's a good affirmation.
Okay, Shadira, we have a game on our show called Trigger. And basically I say a word, you say the first thing that comes to mind when I say it. Don't overthink it. Just whatever comes to mind. Bad habits.
Weed.
What? What do you mean bad? This is not
good
a
habit.
bad
So to briefly explain.
As I'm smoking a big fat joint.
To briefly explain, and sorry to my parents if you're hearing this. They probably already know, but sorry if you're hearing me say this. I'm a weed smoker. Why I say it's a bad habit is because sometimes I get into a place where it's starting to become an addiction, so I force myself to stop. Like, I don't pick up anymore for like months, and I'm like, see, I'm not
an addict. I'm not a crackhead.
I'm not an addict.
You heard it here first.
I'm not an addict.
I'm an addict.
Thin line.
Verified. I'm in a heavy season of smoking right now, actually. I've been really going for it lately. Can you hear it in my voice?
It's okay. Seasons are temporary.
I even feel like I have like smoker voice. I'm like, yeah, I'm smoking big blunts.
Adulting, you can't raw dog.
Okay. Sorry, I got sidetracked because you were talking shit about my beautiful flower. Marriage.
Beneficial.
Motherhood.
Sacrificial.
Religion.
Oppressive.
Anal.
Uncharted territory.
Pegging.
Unfamiliar.
You haven't been asked to peg as a dom yet?
People ask me that, and the thing is, I'm not in a place in my life where I'm curious about any bum holes, including my own. I've never been anally stimulated. I don't have
about a little
any
finger,
interest in
little finger in the.
Do you know what? I've had a finger in there, and it feels like I'm meant to like push it out. I feel weird. I'm like, should I bear down?
Not should I bear down.
don't get it. Like, it feels like I should poo.
A tongue, maybe? A little tongue?
I don't like it.
Okay. Eating pussy.
Curious.
Dating status.
Single.
Love language.
Money.
UK men.
UK men. Oh, musty.
Oh, okay.
Shits and giggles.
Because they're
What
stingy.
are they called? Shits and gags?
Shits and giggles.
Oh, girl, we don't have enough time for that.
Shits
We
and
do not have it all.
It's not gags.
Is it shits and gags?
It might as well be.
It's shits and
It might
giggles.
as well be.
It's shits and giggles?
Yeah.
Those niggas' name is Giggles? They have
Shit,
giggles
no,
in the title?
gigs. I think it's shits and gigs.
Oh.
Is that it? I don't know. I think it's shits and gigs.
It is gigs.
It's shits and gigs.
Okay.
No word? Nothing.
Oh, what? Well, disappointing. I'll say that.
Shits and gigs. White men.
Option.
Have you been with a white man? Have you had sex with have you had white
I
penis inside of
take
you?
white men's money, but I've not had sex. I've not had sex with a white man in over 10 years.
So you've had white penis inside of you?
A decade
have,
ago. It doesn't even
unfortunately.
count. I said a
I've
decade
had white
ago.
penis inside me, but the pussy does not hold the score, unfortunately. She doesn't remember.
Black men.
Oh. Delightful.
God, that sounds so
Delightful.
wonderful. You know what? I've decided that I'm going to read the rest of these words.
Here's your 5 minutes. Here you go.
Here I go.
Yes.
Woo. Favorite sex position.
Oh. What's it called when you're like to the side?
The lazy fuck?
Like,
Is he behind you?
what's that? No, he's next. He's next to me.
Wait, he's in front of you. He's like you're
Like
this,
spooning you?
and he's in front of you, or you're to the you're actually to the side.
We're both to the side of each other.
Yeah, that's like a lazy fuck.
like the cuddle.
Yeah,
the lazy fuck.
I just made that up.
lazy snuggle fuck.
Snuggle
Lazy
fuck.
snuggle fuck.
Snuggle fuck. Snuggle fuck me, babe. Snuggle fuck.
Can we do that snuggle fuck thing? It sounds like a Sesame Street character. Mr. Snuggle fuck.
Mr. Snugglefuck wants to count to 10.
Snuggle fuck is here to help. I'm here to save the day.
That's a character in our children's show. I mean, adult children's show. Last bad choice. Am I English? I don't know how to say these words. Last bad choice.
You more practice.
Ooh, one word. Believing a man.
Believing?
Yeah, believing a man is the last one.
I believe.
Like, joke's on me. Boo. Duh.
Last good choice.
Ooh, coming on this podcast.
That's right, baby. Happily ever after.
Ooh, happily ever after. Mansion.
Monogamy.
Open end.
Cannabis.
Medicinal.
Boxers or briefs.
Ooh. Boxers.
Celebrity crush.
Frank Ocean.
Oh.
I know, right?
Frank Ocean.
Where's he been?
Frank
where are you?
Ocean.
Remember that time we saw him in Brooklyn?
We did.
And we were just so enamored. He just walked by and we're like,
we were having the best day ever.
We were.
having the best day.
And then he just like walked by. And I think we continued to have like a really good day, right? It just got crazier after that.
I
Yeah.
love Frank Ocean.
Yeah.
I love that man.
Masturbation.
Absolute yes.
What do you like to use to masturbate? Do you use your finger? Am I fucking Australian?
Are you from the down under?
So I
What do you
actually have
use to masturbate?
I have a technique that I feel like I need to just tell all the girls who are like, oh, I don't know how to masturbate. I don't know how to make myself. Girl, let me tell you what you need to do, right?
Tell the girlies.
Just the
Get
whore.
the lube, put the lube on your titties.
Wait.
You're going to need a mirror. You're going to need lube.
Wait.
You're going to need...
This looks like you have
lube
two
on my titties?
Looks like you have two lubes because you just did a double
Yes.
squirt. So I'm
Okay,
gonna
we
get
need
two
lube. We need a mirror.
Because you know you can get
we need
titty
titties.
orgasms. You know that, right?
What?
I need to work on that.
You know, you can get titty orgasms.
I've had one, but one of my nipples is numb because I had my boobs done and they cut my nipple, and it's a whole thing.
I thought it was coming back.
So,
Not like it used to.
so the nipple that's still alive.
The
Okay, in our
one's
last
good.
5 minutes,
She's
I'm gonna explain this in our last 5 minutes, right? If you have nipples that are still awake, lube on the titties. Okay, you need two sex toys, both vibrators. I would say the rose toy is good for the pussy. You're gonna need a vibrator for the boobs that is like a it looks like a penis, but it doesn't have to be a penis, just like a just like a longish
phallic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, a phallic
lingam.
vibrator. Yes. So what you want to do is choose a setting for the phallic vibrator, and you use that on the titties and you alternate. You need to be doing it in the mirror so you can be like, oh my God, I'm so hot. And then you can start with using fingers because you're getting the titty orgasm. So you're kind of like, whoa, this feels nice. And then you introduce the rose to the chat when you start to get wet. And you will most likely projectile squirt. If you're someone who's like, oh, I don't squirt, I promise you, you will.
Okay, well, I'm going to be reaching out to you in about 2 weeks as soon as I get my
gonna
tools
change your
together.
life.
Please report back.
And I am going to tell you because I'm writing notes, and this is the first time ever anyone's given us that like deeply of a masturbation instruction, and I'm really looking forward to trying it. So
That's the
thank
job. That's why I've survived since 2021 without being with a man. A man can't do that.
you. I mean,
No, you know what? I had a strong era of some bomb ass masturbation where I
That
literally
rose.
was like, I don't really need the dick. I had this dick strapped to the wall. I had the vibrator. But actually, that is, thank you for the reminder. I haven't been masturbating in a mirror in a while, and I think it's time to run that back.
The mirror is the main part because
Yeah.
you need the visual.
Of
You have to be
you.
gay for yourself. Like
Yeah.
you have to genuinely look at yourself and be like, oh my God, this is so hot.
I need to get a mirror.
And for best effects, if you have like a satin robe, like satin is really nice for like erogenous areas because something about the slip of the fabric. So if you're wearing a satin robe, use the vibrator on your titty through the robe, if that makes sense.
Igniting
Because
all of
that
the
gets you
senses.
even more. Yeah, because then when you remove the robe, you feel if the sensitivity heightens even more. And if you can, for best effects as well, if your robe is long enough, like put a bit of the fabric of the robe on your pussy and then put the vibrator on the robe. And when you remove the robe, it's even more like heightened sensations. I figured all this out because it's been 4 years and counting of not being with a man. So now I'm
No,
like,
no,
a
I'll
man
tell you how I
can't do
figured it
this.
out.
I'm so sorry. Like, he's gonna have to just like have his hand tied and he can watch. Like, you can't even be of any use in the situation. Just sit down.
So let's go. Well,
and
you're
just
like,
be
get
an
the
audience.
satin. No, put it here. Put it there. No,
Never mind,
No,
just
get
get the fuck
instructions.
away.
the fuck out of here.
Just watch. Don't
I'll
touch.
do it.
Oh my God.
I've enjoyed this.
This has been
I've
so
enjoyed this
amazing.
very
I
much.
can't wait to come to see you. I can't wait to come across the pond.
You have to come on this podcast. You have to be in this room with me.
We
Absolutely.
would love it. We would love it.
We're on our way.
We're on the way.
We're on the way.
I would
It's
love
done.
to. Thank you for fostering a beautiful conversation where I can discuss the pain and the complexity of being estranged from my mother, and I can also talk about rubbing my titties in one episode. I think
I mean,
the range
it's all
is
very important
impeccable.
things that we all needed to know. It was all nothing could
Oh,
have been
hell
missed.
yeah.
Not one point. I appreciate.
Not one
your-
stone hasn't been turned.
I appreciate your vulnerability and your range because women have range. There's a lot of parts of us, and we need to talk about it all.
Thank you. And to any mothers who are listening, and if you've heard my story, you still have time to turn it around. You still have time. And deep down, you are a good mother. But if you're making bad choices, your child is going to have whatever outcome. And if that means the child doesn't speak to you again, you will have to live with that choice. So you still have time, mother, wherever you are. Not my mother, because she ain't got time. But she ain't changing. But to the mothers who are listening to this, first, if you're a mother who've been listening to this podcast, then you're already on the right track. I wish my mother would listen to this podcast because it would encourage her to see herself beyond just being a mother. Because being a mother is a whole world in itself, but women deserve to have identities outside of that. So thank you for creating this podcast and thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. I'm deeply grateful that you feel safe here. And yes, to the mothers listening, I think it's a beautiful reflection. And that's what this is all about. And if you resist the reflection, you're going to end up being a psychopath. It's just science. So don't be a psychopath.
Grow.
Be a good mom.
Grow, baby, grow.
And rub your
even
pussy
when it
instead.
hurts, even when it's hard.
And rub your pussy with satin.
Period.
What was the tarot of the day, my dear?
The tarot of the day was the Hierophant reversed, and it means, in its positive form, the Hierophant reversed reminds you that you are your own teacher. All the wisdom you seek comes from within, not from some external source or power. You are being guided to follow your own path and adopt your own spiritual beliefs rather than blindly following others. It may feel unsettling at first as you make your own way, but over time you will learn to trust yourself and tap into your inner knowledge. Others may question your motives to go against tradition, but you know deep within that now is the time. So you don't need external approval to succeed, as you have exemplified so beautifully. And honestly, so grateful to like connect with you and have you here and hear your story. And I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you
so much
Shadira.
for listening.
Can you let our people know where they can find you?
You can find me online on social media at the Slumflower. I mainly use Instagram. And if you would love to listen to my podcast and hear more about how I tackle a world full of men without losing my mind, I am on the Slumflower Hour podcast on all streaming platforms, including YouTube if you don't have any of the streaming platforms. Thank you for having me. I really, really loved this. This was very healing and affirming. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And we will see you guys next week. You know where to find us. Just click all the things in the caption and do all that stuff. We love you.
Bye.
Bye.
I'm living so good, can't you tell? I went through a drought, that's until I found a well. Made my heaven on earth, I used to be broke as hell. Now I got the blues dancing like Beyonce Giselle. Throat chakra popping, there's power in our voices. Patriarchy kept it in the box to exploit us. Women put the P in power, so it's pointless. They want me to be good, so I made bad choices. Bad mom, not a bad mom, but a bad mom. Get her Zen on, put cannabis in her bath bomb. Walked in, boss was capping, I blew his cap off. Top dog now, I'm immune to the cat calls. Curvy in the waist, but straight to it like a dollar sign. Mother and a lover, intuitive like a water sign. Warrior in the winter and sensual in the summertime. I do it all, ain't no one I need to run it by.